be a successful hair director, you need to be able to communicate, not only with your team and your clients, but also with the media. Backstage, amongst the chaos, part of your job will be to somehow find an oasis of calm in your mind and eloquently describe the look, the inspiration, and how to recreate it. And with more and more instant access through social media channels, the demand for content from sponsors and brand is just getting greater. So in this lesson, we're going to look at why speaking to the media backstage is one of the most important parts of your job as the hair director. And I'll give you 3 simple steps to make sure that you always know exactly what to say so that you never freeze on camera like I did backstage at Alexander Wang, New York Fashion Week. Yeah, anyway, I'll tell you about that a little bit later. But first, let's dive into the 3 things that you need to do to crush it when you're asked to do media. 1, know your audience. 2, structure your content. And 3, prepare and practice. What do I mean by know your audience? If you think about it, when you're being interviewed backstage by a beauty editor or an influencer, you might actually, well, obviously you're talking to that person directly, face to face, but ultimately what you're saying is being said for their audience, the people that follow them, that watch their show or read their publication. So ask yourself, who are you talking to? Is it a consumer audience or is it a trade audience? Because you'll speak differently to each one. If you're talking to people at home who love hair and fashion and are looking for key trends and quick tips, you'll speak differently than if you're talking to hairdressers who want to know more technical knowledge and a little bit more product-specific why and how, as well as the trends. So if you're talking to a consumer audience, you want to focus on trends, tips, and product advice. Things that you know a non-hairdresser could quite easily digest. You might want to use terms like lived-in texture or that fresh washed feeling, after the gym hair, etc. You're also going to simplify your kind of get the look tips into bigger, more general steps that a consumer can easily follow. If you look at this look from the Stolen Girlfriends Club show as an example, if I was talking to a hairdresser or a trade audience, in other words, one of the trade magazines or perhaps one of the sponsors marketing team who was going to send the info out to salons and salon professionals, then I'd probably say something like, the look for the Stolen Girlfriends show this season was inspired by the club kids of the 80s. We wanted the models to feel as if they'd been out all night partying and were keen to carry on. So that was the vibe or the inspiration. And to create the look, we worked with 3 key products depending on the model's hair type. We worked with Redken One United, which is our multi-purpose leave-in and styling lotion. Full Effect, which is a soft hold styling mousse with lots of moisture. And Fashion Work, a flexible light hold hairspray. So to recreate the look, you start by prepping the hair with a slightly oily or sweaty looking texture. Then, using a 1-inch curling iron, create random defined curls. Without brushing the curls out, just use your fingers to secure the hair at the high point of the head, twist into a loose top knot, secure with U-pins, and then embellish with a piece of fabric from the collection to give the effect of a scrunchie. Then we pulled a few loose pieces out and sprayed lightly with Fashion Work to define them. Whereas if we took the same look and tried to communicate that to a consumer audience, I would say something more like, so this is a really fun look this season at Stolen Girlfriends Club. It's inspired by that kind of club kids look at the 80s, and I feel like anyone could rock this look. Super easy to do. You just start by getting a kind of post-gym texture in your hair, which you can get with a multi-purpose spray like One United. Then you throw your hair in a high top knot, and the trick here is to make sure that it's right at the top of the head rather than at the crown. It makes it feel a bit more playful and 80s. And then grab a coloured scrunchie. Anything will do really, and just throw it in. If you want to make sure it holds, you can always use a flexible hairspray like Redken Fashion Work. So you see what I did there, right? 2 different audiences, 2 different structures. And actually this leads me to the second point, which is structure. So your soundbite should have 3 pieces of content. It wants to have a what, a how, and a why. So write those down: what, how, why. Now the what includes the look, the designer's name, the location, which is Fashion Week, which city you're in, what season it is, key products and tools. The reason that you want to name the designer and the season, because if they're being written about or publicized because of the interviews that you've done, it adds PR value to the brand, and then it adds value to your service, which makes it more likely that you get hired again. And likewise with your sponsors, they're paying a lot to be associated with you and this particular show. So make sure you talk about the products and how to use them. That's what they're there for. Now, the how part of it is a kind of step-by-step, right? Clear and simple. First do this, then do that. And try to keep it to no more than 4 or 5 steps for a trade audience, and cut it down to 2 or 3 steps for a consumer audience. The easier the better, right? Even if you have to kind of combine steps together and gloss over some of the finer details. And the why, that can include things like the inspiration or some other hot tips or fun facts that will ensure that the subtleties of the look are understood and executed. It'll also give you a chance to give tips on the products and tools you've recommended to recreate the look. And that's the key here, right? It's not about an in-depth tutorial. It's really just a chance to share a few tips on how someone who sees the images from the show might be able to replicate the look or a version of it at home or in the salon. And the third thing is prepare and practice, right? So preparation includes making notes of the key steps and the feature products. And I just like to make these notes in bullet form so that you can kind of see the structure of what you're saying. So you've got the what, the how, the why, and the key products. And it also is a good idea to validate with the designer and the creative director that your messaging, the words and phrases you're choosing about the mood and the vibe are in line with what they're saying as well. I recommend that what you can do is practice by saying it out loud to your assistant and to the designer to validate your ideas and inspiration, and maybe even repeat it out loud to yourself a few times in the car or the bathroom to get a feel for the words in your mouth before you're on the spot and in the midst of the chaos. So when you're backstage and you're called upon to speak to the media, all of a sudden out of the blue, you'll be 100% confident, ready, knowing that you know exactly what to say. Now, a good idea is to grab one of the models that's had their hair done and stand with you, because it gives you a nice visual point of reference. And if you've set your team up well, if you've followed that model, then they should be busy doing the hair, and you'll have enough time, enough headspace to graciously accept and give the interviews and give the media as much time as they need. That adds so much value to your clients and the sponsors. I find this hard to believe, but I've actually seen hair directors shout at media, no interviews, when they've been under the pump, stuck in that old mode of directing a show. You don't want to be that person. You want to be accommodating and willing to give a warm and engaging soundbite backstage. That way they'll want to come back and talk to you more. And on that note, actually I should tell you what happened to Alexander Wang at New York Fashion Week when I froze on camera while I was being interviewed. I was working on Guido's team, and the look for this particular show was kind of the hair that I do naturally, right? It was right up my alley. So when Guido had to leave before the models walked to go off and start on the Marc Jacobs show, he left me in charge to lead the team to make sure that the look was executed to his standards, because he knew that it was my type of hair. It was kind of awkward because I was just new to the team. And even though Guido kind of shouted out and told everyone, Richard's in charge here, at that point in the team, I didn't have the established kind of experience or leadership authority. I didn't have time in the group, and there was kind of like all these weird little power struggles going on. So anyway, needless to say, I wasn't prepared at all to speak to the media, because when you work on a team, when you're assisting somebody, you never speak to the media, because if someone comes up to you and tries to talk to you about the hair, then you always direct them to the hair director or their agent. I would have always just said, no, you've got to go and speak to Guido, I can't talk about the hair. But in this situation, of course, there was no Guido, and I was in charge. And his agent actually brought a TV news crew over to me to talk about the hair. They framed up the shot, they turned on the camera, and the interviewer goes, so, we're backstage at Alexander Wang at the New York Fashion Week show, and we're here with Richard Kavanagh. Richard, tell us about the hair. And I just froze. I went, hairspray, lots of hairspray. It was so awkward. You know, they pretty quickly just saw that it was going to be pretty shit content. They turned the camera off and walked away, and, you know, obviously it didn't air. I was horrified because at that point I was actually an experienced presenter. I had loads of TV experience. I was super comfortable on camera. I did live TV all the time, but I froze like a deer in the headlights because I wasn't prepared. I hadn't thought about it. I didn't have my structure. So, moral of the story, know your audience, structure your content, prepare and practice.